It spread across the globe, leaving death and destruction in its wake. It changed the fate of empires and wars and caused the most deadly pandemic in modern history, killing more than both world wars combined. But what caused it to be so deadly? How did it spread so quickly and ruthlessly across the globe, killing millions? And how might it do it again, bringing our modern world to its knees? This is the history of influenza. In our ever-advancing world, it can be easy to forget just how good we have it, compared to even just a few decades ago. Numerous advancements in various fields have led to the average person in the developed world living a longer and healthier life than what was expected for our parents and grandparents. Many ills and maladies that once troubled and even threatened humanity have seemingly been done away with and forgotten. Among one of these blights, the influenza virus. But is it wise to forget one of our greatest enemies in the past and its potential to cause devastation in our present?
If you ask someone on the street what pops into their mind when they hear the word influenza, the response you typically get is vaccination, vaccines, perhaps the cold itself, the common cold. But historically, for far longer, if you were to ask someone, say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, what pops into their mind when they hear the word influenza, the one-word response you would typically get is the word pandemic.
For most of its history, influenza, far from being an inconvenience, has been a methodical killer, leaving destruction and death in its wake. It has long walked by man's side, but just how long has it been our unwanted companion?
The time and place of influenza's origins has unfortunately been lost to the sands of time. We believe it originated somewhere in Eurasia around the time man first started domesticating animals. You see, there once had been a barrier between species, but once man started to live in close proximity with animals, he created the perfect condition for a spillover event.
The first recorded outbreak of influenza may have occurred as early as 412 BC in ancient Greece. The contemporary physician Hippocrates writes,
"Swellings appeared about the ears, many on either side. Many had dry coughs accompanied with hoarseness of voice. Many, and in fact the most of them, died. And of those confined to bed, I do not know if a single individual survived for any considerable time."
According to those who survived the pandemic, it was thought by most that the end of days were upon them.
ant omenes sacasapalis. I don't know
While many believe the pandemic referenced by Hippocrates was caused by influenza, it would not be until 1580 that the world experienced what historians consider the first confirmed influenza pandemic. It originated in Asia, and spreading along the Silk Road, it found itself on the doorstep of Europe. By the winter of that year, the sound of the dead and dying could be heard in the cities.
Portuguese chronicler Antonio de Herrera. Why aren't you recording? You've got to be kidding me. Alright, we're cutting to a skit. No more fourth wall breaks. Even the Queen of Spain died. With the Queen dead, we must notify the next of kin. First, Philip. As you wish, sir. The husband or the uncle? Well, actually, Rodrigo, doesn't matter. They're the same person either way. The pandemic of 1580 is relegated to the footnotes of history, forgotten in favor of its more grander and deadly cousins. But I feel this is a grave mistake. For you see, the pandemic of 1580, if for nothing else, stands as a shining example of how fast a pandemic can spread, a virus can spread, without the use of trains or airplanes. We don't need a modern world, a globalized world, for a global pandemic.
The next major outbreak of influenza in Europe wouldn't be until 1729, in Russia.
Vladimir Bovich, why do you not harvest potato from frozen Russian soil? Because you have a cold. Of course you have cold. This is Russia. We are always cold here. This gag would work a whole lot better if it wasn't 80 degrees in the middle of April.
With influenza spreading throughout the Russian Empire, the government was forced to act. Well, that's disappointing. We had a historian lined up who was going to talk about Russia and everything, but he's not here. I don't really know what he was going to talk about, but I mean, it's safe to assume that, it was bad and people died and stuff, I guess. While there would be further instances of influenza throughout the 17 and 1800s, it wouldn't be until the beginning of the 20th century when the greatest pandemic of them all finally struck. All right, Mr. Gritchell, let's see what the issue is today. Fever, sores, purple spots? Oh, my sweet baby Jesus. That first case was just the start. Soon, influenza was infecting hundreds, then thousands, and soon, before even the end of the month, the virus had spread across the entire U.S.
If I'm sick, who's gonna shoot the targets at target practice?
Hey, I'm coughing here.
The pandemic didn't just stay in the United States, however. Soon, due to the war in Europe, American troops were bringing the virus all across the world. The pandemic truly was global. Okay, so, are we sure he's still alive? He smells like he's already decomposing. Nah, he's still with us. He just smells that way because, according to this record, he's 122 years old. That seems a wee bit implausible. Well, how are we going to wake up the old man? The way Janice said to. Like this. Of him we sing. Mr. Williams? Sit down, Mr. Williams. You don't need to stand up like that. Move back.
My name is John Williams, and I served during the war. I remember when I first joined up, my mom told me she was tired of me living at home. She said, go join the army, son. So I did. I was 16 at the time. I'd seen a lot during my time. It didn't prepare me for that new enemy. I remember the day when we caught it. I remember the day when influenza first came in my life.
I remember my time back in the army. I was just a wee lad at 16, and I remember seeing war wasn't what it was cracked up to be. It was hell, and it made devils of us all, that was for sure. And towards the end of it, the supply lines were cut. We couldn't get our backhoe or replacement uniforms, and that's the canon reason why you see we wore civilian attire during these skits. And because, as I said, the supply lines were cut, we didn't catch the bug as quick as the other lads up the front. But we got it nonetheless. I remember that morning. I'd just taken a letter to my captain.
Private Williams, you have done your Majesty's government a great service. That'll be all, lad. Captain Price, we received your request for reinforcements. Due to the recent German counteroffensive and illness spreading through the ranks, we were unable to spare the requested battalion. However, 2 companies have been given under your command. They are wet behind the ears and just out of basic, but their fiery spirit shall surely win victory on the battlefield. May the King's Regiment of Hoof, even the 7th of Angus, serve admirably under your command. What kind of regiment?
Munch, munch, chomp, munch, 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 chomp, chomp, munch.
Those are no Englishmen. They're just Scots. 7th of Angus. Angus County, Scotland. They're Scots. Makes sense. I thought those boys from Edinburgh looked weird.
Ready, man?
Over the top, lads!
Eisenhaugen. Sie kaufen sie Eisenhaugen. So sind.
Alarm! Eisenhaugen! Eisenhaugen, Sohn!
We lost many good men that day. Even my good friend Robert, bless his soul. Poor lad barely made it over the trench top.
We had won the battle, but the Krauts had one last trick up their sleeves.
Oh, Sanderson. Ist überbitten. Hagenesen. Hier sind Homersen. Edon Uding Jaden. Wo ist denn Sohn? Sie sind feirig. Eisenhaugen, Sohn. Wir sind Hardenberg.
Sir, I respectfully report that the final German holdouts have surrendered, sir.
Smells like victory.
All right, boys. Grab yourself a rifle and form up. Robert Williams, is there a problem?
Sir? These are just sticks.
Sticks? These are no sticks, these are rifles. Why, you're just parroting German propaganda. 2 days in the cooler.
No.
So what are you in for? And that's the day I caught influenza.
Now let me tell you,
I was never sicker than I was those 2 weeks back during the war. The fever struck, hit me as hard as my childhood bully George did back in Lancaster. The headache I suffered, why, I thought I would explode faster than Henry did when he stepped on that mine. And me lungs couldn't even do their job. It was as hard to breathe in that medical tent as it was back underground in the Cornish coal mines of me youth. And worst of all, I lost me mustache. Not because I was sick, mind you, but because someone used up all the black paper. I am doing my best here. I don't know what else you want. We are 2 days behind filming schedule, okay? I need to get an A on this project or I don't pass the class. I am under a lot of stress. You can cut it out. Despite the subpar performance from the props department, I recovered. And instead of going back into the fighting, I was reassigned to work as a nurse. You see, most of me company caught the flu. With so many lads coming in on the gurneys, I had plenty of patients to diagnose. All right, Tommy, I'll mark you down as having influenza.
Do I look like I have your bloody influenza?
Tommy, in fact, did not have influenza. Tommy had a knife stuck in his chest. However, many lads in the gurneys and the hospitals did have influenza, and it was up to me to treat them. I did so as best I could. Soon, however, the war ended, and Germany never again would declare war on another country, except for that one other time. And there was much rejoicing and celebration as the troops came home. Unfortunately, as one war ended, another continued to pick up steam. The winter of 1918 would see a much more deadly second wave, especially in the United States. 292,000 deaths were reported between September and December of that year, compared to only 26,000 during the same time period in 1915. Responding to the increase in case numbers, many local and state governments began to implement measures to stem the spread. Many of these orders would stay in effect, not only in 1919, but also into 1920 as well. The measures implemented varied wildly by location, as did the punishment for not complying. 500 for arms smuggling into Canada. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 700 for the bank job on the East End. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1100 for the manufacturing and distribution of alcohol. Thank God for Prohibition. Freeze! You are under arrest for not wearing a mask outdoors. Oh, we're good now, right? By the end of 1920, the influenza pandemic had ended in most countries, and although there were some exceptions, such as Chile, for the most part, the world moved on and stopped wearing really weird-looking masks. The Spanish flu, as it would later become known, finally ended, having claimed the lives of over 50 million people. Slowly, but surely, the world moved on. Women were finally allowed to do things. The government said you couldn't drink. And also, the stock market decided there was a good time to crash. As the years turned into decades, man finally began to forget the horrors of influenza. Another great victory was scored when in 1945, a vaccine for influenza was developed by Thomas Francis and Jonas Salk at the University of Michigan. And as such, influenza simply morphed into the common cold for most people in the developed world. We've heard a lot about its effect on history, but what exactly is the influenza virus? To learn more, we scheduled an interview with Dr. Mike Hughes, a professor from Griffin's School of Medicine who has studied influenza for the past 26 years. Unfortunately, due to a cut in federal funding, Dr. Hughes has been let go. So, instead of meeting on campus grounds, we arrive at the parking lot of a random Taco Bell.
So you want to learn about influenza?
The influenza virus is actually viruses plural, with each of its 4 species belonging to its own genus. These genuses are part of the Arthemiridae, that word right there. They're part of that word right there's family. And each of these influenza viruses is different in its own way. Influenza A, B, and C are known to be infectious to humans. Meanwhile, influenza D is not, instead infecting primarily swine and cattle. The life cycle of influenza does not differ majorly between the types. Influenza begins by binding to a cell thanks to HA proteins that bind to receptors on a cell's membrane. Following this, the virus is internalized in the targeted cell. What happens inside is really hard to explain in a short and non-sleep-inducing way, but basically, the virus hijacks the cell and uses its hardware to make more viruses. These viruses, called virons, then leave to infect more cells. The influenza virus is transmitted through actions which spread droplets with virus particles in them through the air. Such actions can include coughing, sneezing, and even talking. In addition, contact with bodily fluids can also transmit the virus. While influenza can and does typically spread from person to person, it can also be transmitted from animals to humans and vice versa. It should be noted as such that livestock such as pigs can and often do serve as reservoirs of influenza, which can then spread to humans. Infected individuals can transmit the virus to others a day before showing symptoms, and can remain transmitters for up to a week after. Influenza, for lack of a better word, sucks. Symptoms one can possibly expect include, but are not limited to, a headache, a fever, coughing fits, runny nose, and a general feeling of weakness. Thankfully, most modern cases of influenza require no treatment, nothing more than rest and ensuring adequate fluid intake. Prevention, which in life is typically more enjoyable and cheaper than the cure, is in the case of influenza, vaccination. Other actions, such as hand washing and avoiding known infected individuals, can also improve one's odds of avoiding the winter sniffles. While we had hoped to continue the interview and learn more about the influenza virus and its effects on humans, unfortunately, due to an unexpected emergency, the interview was cut short.
We good. No, we ain't.
With the interview concluded, we can wrap this thing up.
What does influenza have in store for mankind in the future? Well, it's hard to say for certain. It will continue to spread between species, back and forth, changing and mutating each time. Given enough time, it's likely we'll see a new strain of influenza, one more akin to those of centuries past in terms of mortality. Many health officials are concerned about strains that are developing in swine, fearing that just one mutation be enough to cause a new pandemic that could kill hundreds of millions and bring our modern world to its knees. It wouldn't kill me, though. I'm built like an ox. Da-da-da-dum, da-dum, dum-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Ba-da-da-da-dum, da-dum, dum-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-dum, da-dum, dum-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, da-dum-dum. Da-da-da-dum, dum, da-da-da-dum, 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 dum, da-da-da-dum, dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-dum.
Hey,